We live in such a rush of a world, and we allow ourselves to become subject to that rush. And we lose sight of the fact that we do have our own natural pace. And so what ends up happening is then we are hard on ourselves, or we think there's something wrong because we're not operating at the pace of what's happening externally. Hi friends, welcome back to another episode. I am, as always, so thankful and grateful that you are here, and I'm actually really excited for what we're going to talk about today, because it's come up quite a bit in some research, some reading, what I've found for myself, and then also some communication with others. I also think it's extremely timely for where we are right now, so I hope you can find value in what I'm sharing with you today. And that is the conversation of moving at your own pace. So, what I mean by that is often we find ourselves pushing through when maybe we shouldn't. So, for example, this came up for me and has my whole life, I think for many of you, that we live in such a rush of a world, and we allow ourselves to become subject to that rush. And we lose sight of the fact that we do have our own natural pace. And so what ends up happening is then we are hard on ourselves, or we think there's something wrong because we're not operating at the pace of what's happening externally. For me, this came up where I might have a day at work where I'm really tired, for whatever reason. Maybe it's just the time of the month. Maybe I had a lack of sleep the night before. Maybe I'm not feeding myself the way I should be. But regardless, I would end up with this day where I was extremely tired. And then I would spend the whole day frustrated with myself that I was tired. So saying things like, you need to wake up, you're being lazy, why are you always tired, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I would turn to things like caffeine, or doing whatever I could to try and stay awake, and not acknowledging where I was in my own body. And vice versa, there are other days where maybe externally, in fact, this happened for me yesterday, there's some external factors going on that are causing my world to slow a little bit. We had an issue with a piece of equipment at the office, and so it was really causing me to slow down and just recognize that this isn't a quick fix. This is something we're going to need to work through. But internally, I had a whole lot of energy that day, so I really wanted to move through and move forward and push through, and these external factors were slowing me down. So then, yet again, I end up in that space of frustration where I feel like the pace doesn't match. And as I've been sharing some of this information with my friends and family and community, this has been a reoccurring theme because I've been talking a lot about following your own pace, about acknowledging where you are, not the external factors, but your internal pace, and being okay with that. And I've gotten a lot of feedback and questions saying, how, right? So yeah, I get it. I can follow my own pace, but how do I become okay with that? How do I listen to what that pace is? How do I acknowledge and not be hard on myself for the fact that it's maybe not the pace that I want it to be? And so I thought I would do a little bit of a deeper dive into this concept to hopefully give you a little bit more of a base, some structure, and maybe some takeaways to start implementing it into your life. What I will tell you is acknowledging your own pace is not going to be something that happens overnight. I still struggle a lot with being okay working in that space. But what's interesting, to give you a bit of a heads up, is that I have found when I focus on my pace and working within my own energy levels, I actually get more done. And I don't always think that measuring something in terms of getting it done is always the best way to measure. But in other words, my productivity, the tasks that I have in front of me, the projects that I want to work on, that I'm excited to work on, end up actually happening at not only at a better pace, but I think they're more true. I mean, like if I'm working on a project coming from a place of comfort um, and trueness and feeling like it. Let me back this up. So in other words, if I'm feeling rushed and overwhelmed and frustrated with myself and I want to go create a podcast, am I going to create a good podcast? No. But if I can acknowledge, you know what, I'm a little bit tired today. My energy is a little bit slower. What's something I could create out of that? Then the richness of the product I'm creating is going to be greater, right? The podcast that I'm going to record is going to be more in line, more in tune, and probably more applicable to others because I'm not forcing against myself. So these instances and pace differences come up for me still. And it's not going to be a quick fix of saying, okay, well, now I'm going to follow my own pace and everything's just going to work. It's going to be recognizing and implementing some practices every day. I think the biggest difference is I am more quickly able to recognize when I'm working against myself. Previously, I might have gone a couple of days really being hard on myself and frustrated and in probably a bit of a mood because I wasn't able to just kind of step back from that, acknowledge and say, okay, this is the space I'm in. What can I do to support myself here? And now I can do that much more quickly, right? For example, again, that a piece of equipment at the office that wasn't working yesterday, after fiddling with it for some time, I finally said to myself, I'm going to handle this later. Right now is not the time. I'm not in the appropriate headspace. I'm not being productive because I'm getting frustrated. And so I'm going to step back. I'm going to save this for later. It's funny I bring this up because that's something that I remember my mom used to tell me a lot when I was younger, just walk away. It usually was in reference to my brother because there was something that we were butting heads against each other about. He was quite stubborn, so a lot of times it was sort of like speaking to a brick wall. I love you, bud. And plus, it worked both ways because speaking to me sometimes was like speaking to a brick wall too. So I'm not pointing fingers by any means. But I remember she would tell me, just walk away. Just get out of the room, walk away. It's not going to be productive at this point. And that's all I'm really talking about is being able to recognize now's not the time. So as I mentioned, this has come up for a lot of individuals. I've had people asking me, well, how do I do this? And I want to start with acknowledging what your pace is and what that actually means. So our bodies, of course, operate at a certain rate. And I think we live in a culture that assumes that that rate is going to be the same all the time. That like a machine, I should be able to just wake up with energy and head into the next day the same way. I mentioned in a previous episode that part of the reason that's a struggle in our society is because between different individuals, and actually it's been shown between different genders, between men and women, that those energy cycles are different. And typically for men, their energy cycles are day by day. So in other words, waking up in the morning with that same level of energy heading through the day and closing down for the night is a natural rhythm. It's not to say that there aren't men that are out of that rhythm, just like we all can be out of our own rhythm, but typically that's their structure. Whereas for women, our energy cycles typically over 28 days rather than 24 hours. And so those 28 days are filled with levels and changes in our hormones, the types of hormones that our body is producing over that month really affects the way our energy levels in a given day. So we might have 4 days of high energy and feeling great, and then we might have 4 days of very low energy and feeling very sluggish. And that's where so many of our constructs in our society become very difficult, because if you work a 9 to 5 weekday job, or if you think of Monday through Friday, you might not be in a high energy state from Monday through Friday. Maybe your high energy is Thursday through Sunday, and then you hit Monday at work and you're just feeling like a slug, and you're thinking, well, I took the weekend, I should have recuperated. It has nothing to do with the weekend, and sometimes it has nothing to do with the amount of sleep. That's been an interesting point for me because I sleep a lot. I sleep typically at least 8 hours a night, sometimes even more, between 8 and 10. And so a lack of sleep is not the cause of a dip in energy for me. I'm getting plenty of sleep. That dip in energy is caused by typically a dip in my hormones, and I track this very clearly so I know when that's going to happen each month, and I do my best to prepare myself for those dips in energy, and I'm still working on it, but that's one way for us to kind of get an idea of when energy is going to be high and when energy is going to be low. So the first step in all of this is being able to listen to your body. So when you wake up on a day, the other point here is don't necessarily just like right off the day, right from the morning, because I don't know about you, I still sometimes wake up quite in a bit of a grogginess, and it takes a little while for me to get my day going. So I would say by 10 or 11 or so in the morning, you should be able to have an idea of what your energy level is like for that day. Excuse me. So of course it can change throughout the day, but at that midday, kind of late morning point, how are you feeling? You got to acknowledge that energy without criticizing it. So most often our first thoughts are, well, I feel tired, which means I'm lazy and I need to wake up, so I'm going to head to get some coffee, right? I'm asking you to, before we head down to the spiral of why and how and if and when and what I can do to fix it, to just think, how do I feel? Just take a gauge and say, I feel high energy, I feel low energy. Great. Once you start doing that over a period of time, what you're doing is you're training your brain to start listening to what's going on just as it is, right? Being able to get in touch with your body. So your body has its own natural pace. I like to think of this as your internal pace and an external pace. So the world is an external pace. There is a lot in the world that moves at all different sorts of speeds. Some things move very quickly and some things move very slowly, and it's all relative. An external speed might be the fact that this morning everything was just firing at you. You know, the kids were upset and your husband couldn't find his keys and you were trying to get the laundry in, and breakfast was burning and all these things, and it feels like, oh my gosh, time needs to slow down. And then you get on the road on your way to work and the person in front of you is driving 15 under the speed limit and you're like, oh my gosh, speed up, right? So these are all external speeds and paces that we really don't have control of. But what we do have control of is our internal pace. So in that same example, if that morning, well, all that's going on, the breakfast is burning, can't find the keys, the kids are upset, your internal pace is very slow that day. Your energy level is low. You're going to really struggle with all those external factors that are happening because you're not operating at that pace that morning. You know, sometimes all that stuff can happen and you feel like you've got it covered. You are just like queen mom because you've figured everything out. You're handling the breakfast, you feel great. That's not because you're a failure or a success, guru. It's just the fact that each day we're coming into with a different level of energy and your pace differs. So if you could have woken up that morning, you say, okay, today's one of those days where I'm going to be a little bit slower. I know today that my energy is going to be a little bit low. And whether that's because you've been tracking or maybe that's because you just were able to take that gauge that morning, you can take that moment to say, okay, what can I put in my day today to acknowledge that this is my pace? And this is where we start getting into some of the tools that are helpful. So I find a couple of different things that help me. So yesterday was one of those days where my energy was really low. And so the first thing I do is I acknowledge it. You know what? Today, Tuesday, is slow, and that's okay. And I tell myself that. Sometimes I have to say it out loud. Sometimes I sit in front of the mirror and I say, it's okay. Where you are right now is okay. Where you are right now is where you are supposed to be. And then I tell myself it's one day. It is one day. And whether I do it today or I do it tomorrow, it's not going to make a difference. And then I remind myself too that if it's okay and it doesn't matter whether I do it today or I do it tomorrow, I also tell myself, is it actually going to be done well if I do it right now? That's a big one. So all that stress that's happening in this pace, and at the same time you're trying to throw in laundry, what if you just did the laundry later? What if you just did the laundry tomorrow? What if you said, you know what, today I need to slow it down because tomorrow is going to be a different day. Now, this can be an easy trap to get stuck in because sometimes we fall in that trap of just pushing to the next day over and over and over again. But if you're acknowledging your energy and doing for you in that moment what aligns with your energy, you're not going to keep pushing to the next day. So I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I really wanted to do some recording. I wanted to sit down and do this, actually, record an episode. And between the scanner at work not working, and then I was actually having some tech issues with my camera and my microphone and all this stuff. And my energy was slowly just draining. I think I've been having some allergies symptoms recently, so my eyes were really puffy and tired. And I finally said to myself, I thought, I don't think today's the day. I don't think that I'm going to be able to create something today that's actually going to be of value. It just doesn't feel like it's a good fit. And I said, well, I'm going to try tomorrow. And so I woke up this morning and I asked myself, I said, well, today, if it feels right, I'm going to go ahead and do that recording. And my energy level today is much better. I actually, on my way into the office, feeling really good. And recording this for you hopefully is of value. I feel like I'm at a good energy place and my head's much clearer than it had been yesterday. So what I did there is I acknowledged that pace. I recognized that moving it to the next day was not procrastinating, but it was honoring the space and the pace that I'm at currently. So if we tell ourselves it's okay, so you please, for the love of all things goodness and green beans, I love green beans. Tell yourself that it's okay and stop beating yourself up. Second, let yourself know that whether it happens today or it happens tomorrow, it's one day. In the scheme of things, it is one day. And then third, honor the fact that moving it to the next day might actually be the best thing you can do. Moving it to the next day, moving into that space of energy. What I'm actually starting to do now is I'm realizing there's a week and a half or so each month that I really need to batch some of my recording because I know in that period of time, I'm in a really good place to be recording and executing and talking and sharing these ideas. And there's other times of the month where I'm just not. And so I'm working on building out that calendar to know I'm not going to be able to get up and record something every day. It's just not going to happen. So what days are going to be best for me to do so? I've referenced before and I've talked about a book that I read by Kate Northrup, and it's called Do Less, a revolutionary approach to time and energy management for busy moms. Now, if you read that cover and you say, well, I'm not a mom, so it doesn't apply, it does. I'm not a mom, and it applies completely. So I wanted to just give you a couple of pieces that she talks about because moving at your own pace is difficult. It's new. She even references at some point, she says, I invite us both to think critically about how it's been and how it could be. If we're both willing to think about it all differently, we'll be part of creating a new reality for our children, biological and otherwise, and ourselves. In other words, this level of thinking and this adoption of moving at your own pace is not something that many of us do. So if you start thinking about doing this and you start talking to others, you're going to find that this is kind of a new way of thinking and a new way of operating. But I will tell you and I will promise you, as soon as you start getting to a point where you're honoring that in yourself, it is one of the most beautiful things. The fact that I wake up in the morning not feeling rushed, I head through my day and I do what feels right. And you still have to push through some things. You still have to get those necessities done during the day, but I do it with grace now, knowing that I'm acknowledging myself and I'm not denying myself. And then the best feeling of all of this is that when I head to bed at night, I can just turn off the world. I can just say to myself, I'm done for the day. Whatever I'm thankful and grateful for what I did today, and what I haven't done today, I will do tomorrow, or I will do in the future. And I never used to be that way. I mean, maybe when I was young, but for a long time, I felt like I needed to stay up later and later and later to get things done. And I think that was really taking a toll on me, because it just moved one day into the next, like this never ending race. And personally, I don't think that's good for anyone. It doesn't let you take a moment to listen to who you are and your own self. In her book, she talks about a cosmic flow that pulses through us and around us at all times. So I think that's where we can sort of separate our internal pace and our external pace. She references the fact that actually in a time when she had and was forced to slow down, her business did better, which again is why she's titled it Do Less. One of the things that I really liked that she said, and I'm trying to find it here, and of course I'm not going to be able to. I'll add some things into the notes. But in other words, slowing that down, recognizing where you are, and not necessarily slowing it down, doing it, working at a pace that feels comfortable. Sometimes I'm super excited and really energetic, and so I work at that pace. She does mention that we need to revolutionize the way we work. It's no longer acceptable to work as though we don't have bodies, as though we are not of nature. And I love that, because we do have bodies and they tell us everything. So listen to them. I mean, just today, actually, it was kind of funny when I was looking up the notes for this. I did flip to a page, just happened to flip to a page where I'd written on there, let life lead the way and flow with the current. And we can all do that. I'm going to add in the notes here some references, because I've been asked, that hopefully are helpful in terms of understanding more about working at your own pace. And I really encourage you to try this. If you have questions, reach out to me, message me. I would love to answer them. I have really adapted this lifestyle of moving at that pace and being comfortable with it, and knowing that, it's okay if I don't recognize something right now. We're so influenced by these outside forces that we often are. When you're influenced by outside forces, you become reactionary, and nothing good comes out of being reactionary, because at that point you're not responding from a conscious state. You're responding from a reactive or a unconscious state almost. It's just the immediate response, and often those immediate responses are not the place to be. So for example, if something occurs in your life, that the breakfast is burning, and your reaction is to panic and freak out and get frustrated, what you're going to start training yourself is to, rather than react, it's going to acknowledge, okay, the breakfast burned. In the scheme of things, I mean, it sounds so silly now, but it's like, in the scheme of things, just throw it away and start over, or do something different, adapt and shift and change. But until you can bring yourself to not react, but to acknowledge first, that's not going to change. That reaction is always going to be the first thing. My last point here, because even though this sounds easier, it sounds easy, it's, what do they say? It's simple, but it's not easy. And that's the case here. This is simple, but it's not easy. One other practice that I've mentioned before that will allow us to move from that reactionary state to a acknowledgement state is meditation. When you meditate, what's actually happening is you're allowing your brain to release itself from what is your reactionary muscle. It's what's called the amygdala, and kind of like the center base back. I don't know. If you went like back behind your ears, I think it's back in there. Your amygdala is your fight or flight response. It's your reaction. It's your immediate response. Whereas our rational thought comes from our prefrontal cortex, which is in the front of your brain. And so when you meditate, it's actually releasing that tension and that connectivity in your brain from the amygdala back into the prefrontal cortex and other parts of your brain, and will stay with you through the day. I've found that if I don't meditate at least twice a week, I start to become very reactionary. I try to meditate every day, but it doesn't always happen. So I find usually by the end of like the third or fourth day after meditating, it's starting to wear off and I become much more reactionary. So being able to step back, recognize my own pace, acknowledge where I am, and listen to my body, my internal clock and time becomes much easier when I give myself that 15 minutes of meditation a couple of times a week, if not more frequently if you can. With that, I hope this gives you some insight into acknowledging and knowing that it's not only okay to move at your own pace, it's your responsibility, because moving at your pace is going to allow you to show up as the truest you. It's going to show your family that you are respectful to yourself and to your body and that they should be the same. I hope that you have this conversation with others and introduce this concept to many, because it has been a life changer to me and I think it will be to you. Just acknowledging in yourself that you give yourself permission to move at the pace that you need to move. If anything we've mentioned here resonates with you, you think would be helpful for someone else, please share this episode. You can share it onto your story, and if you tag me, we'll give you a shout out. I am so thankful for all of you and the support that you have shown me and all that you're doing for yourselves, for your families, and for your communities. Make it a great rest of your day. Acknowledge your energy today and live at that pace. Thanks, guys.